This video was brought to you by Brilliance. All over the world, people love the BBC, but people also love to hate the BBC. Over the last year or so, the UK's public broadcaster has been hit by a torrent of criticism, targeting everything from its content to its impartiality guidelines. Amid heavy funding cuts, the broadcaster is now massively scaling back production, leading people to wonder, is the BBC dying? So in this video, we'll take a look at the challenges currently facing the BBC, how it's adapting to a new era of digital news, and whether it can survive.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Do you remember me?
But first, let's start with the BBC's history. Set up in 1922, the corporation was set up by a group of radio manufacturers in London, and its first Director General, John Reith, founded the BBC's core mission: to inform, educate, and entertain. At first, it was funded by royalties from the sale of wireless sets, but by 1927, it had grown into a national public corporation funded by a license fee. Soon after, the BBC sought to gain audiences abroad, and it started broadcasting through partners in the Netherlands, India, and South Africa, before launching its famous World Service in 1932. In the 1930s and 40s, the BBC launched its TV broadcasts, iconic radio programs, and children's television. The BBC then branched out into scientific documentaries and live concerts in the 80s, launched its online news website in 1997, and its on-demand service in the mid-2000s. Today, it's affectionately known in the UK as the Beeb and is a recognised media brand all over the world. But in the last couple of years, the BBC has faced some pressing issues, and we're going to take a look at three of them: its funding crisis, ideological attacks, and internal issues. So, the BBC's biggest challenge right now is funding. The service is ultimately funded by a public licence fee of £159 per year, which accounts for around 75% of its income. Now, the advantages of this model are that BBC services are free of ads, the board is editorially independent, and because it's paid for by the whole of Britain, it has to offer a range of views and content. Detractors of this model, however, including some prominent Conservative politicians, argue that it's financially unfair, as it's the same cost for every household, regardless of wealth, and that the BBC's content would be better if it was subject to the pressures of the free market. The licence fee is also pretty unpopular with the public, and only 24% of Brits support it, compared to 34% of Brits who say that the BBC should be funded by ads. Anyway, under a 2016 agreement signed by the BBC and the UK Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, the licence fee is guaranteed to last until the 31st of December 2027. But after that, its funding model is unclear. The BBC has also recently dealt with budget cuts which have impacted content. In December, about £90 million had to be cut from the BBC's annual budget, but after the government increased the licence fee by a smaller than expected amount. Back in 2022, the licence fee was frozen for 2 years due to the cost of living crisis, but was expected to rise afterwards in line with the annualised CPI figure of 9%. However, the government instead used a lower level of inflation to calculate the increase, to reduce the yearly cost for households. Accordingly, the licence fee will rise to £169.50 from April 2024. While this might sound like a good thing for UK households, the move angered BBC executives, and it necessitates further cuts to services, which are already reduced under a £500 million savings strategy. The service cuts, which began in autumn 2023, are already affecting the BBC's production capabilities, with the broadcaster having halved the staff on its current affairs show Newsnight from 57 to 23, and cut its running time from 40 to 30 minutes. Local radio, documentaries, and commissions have also suffered, as the BBC shifts away from its traditional coverage to digital content. But funding isn't the only issue. Another issue facing the BBC are ideological attacks. That's because people both on the right and the left have criticised the BBC for failing to achieve impartiality. Now, the BBC prides itself on this, but certain events like the Israel-Palestine conflict and the so-called culture wars have seen its reporting attacked from all angles. At times, this has got pretty vicious too, especially in the competing right-wing media, which appears set on undermining the BBC's credibility. Fortunately though, this anti-BBC agenda doesn't seem to have spread just yet. The BBC is still one of the most trusted news outlets in the UK, although there is a notable 13 percentage point gap between right-wing viewers and left-wing viewers, with those on the left more likely to see it as trustworthy. Finally, the BBC has also dealt poorly with some internal issues in recent years. In April 2023, the then BBC chairman, Richard Sharp, resigned after failing to declare a secret £800,000 personal loan to the former Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And in June, explicit photo allegations involving a senior BBC News presenter and a teenager prompted Tory MP Lee Anderson to brand the BBC as a safe haven for perverts. There's also been public anger over past scandals, including the BBC's Savile cover-up, even after his death in 2011, the gender pay gap, which was revealed in 2017, and whether football pundit Gary Lineker's tweets breach BBC impartiality rules. So, as journalism heads into a new age of digital content, can the BBC survive? Well, while the new restructure sadly led to the loss of local presenter jobs and hours of programming, which has widely been criticised for its impact on vulnerable groups, it has led to new jobs in BBC Verify, specialist roles in OSINT, the creation of a new BBC investigations unit, and new reporter roles covering AI, finance, employment, and housing. Now, this doesn't mean that the BBC's online content is there just yet. The BBC also doesn't seem to have carved out a niche in social media yet, with some recent posts, such as this bizarre clip of a policeman being slammed by a car on the side of a highway, perhaps not the kind of thing you'd expect from the Beeb. But perhaps the biggest threat to the BBC isn't the changing media landscape, but rather the more mundane issue of funding. The licence fee is guaranteed until 2027, and a recent government report recommended retaining some sort of public funding after 2027, either via a specific tax or a fee combined with a hybrid subscription model, on the grounds that a purely advertising-funded BBC was, quote, highly unlikely to be viable. However, with public finances under strain and the electorate at best ambivalent about the licence fee, it's possible that the BBC's public funding will continue to be eroded by future governments. In this case, it's hard to see the Beeb surviving in its current glory, not least because the UK, unlike other Western countries, has a relatively low proportion of people willing to pay for news. This is because high-quality free news isn't just available from the BBC, but also from commercial broadcasters like Sky News and ITV. In fact, only about 9% of people in the UK have paid for online news in the last year, compared to 21% in the US. Nonetheless, while its funding situation at the moment does seem a bit bleak, the UK government still recognises the BBC as a national institution and seems prepared to keep supporting it as it muddles through its digital transition. A lot of stuff in our videos can often seem pretty complicated, especially when we dive deep into detailed data and economics. But there's a fun and easy way for you to learn more about these topics, which doesn't cost thousands of dollars a year or take years of studying. That's because Brilliant is the best way to learn maths, data science, and computer science interactively. And the fun thing is that it doesn't take long to learn either. These complex topics are broken down into small and accessible chunks, designed around your busy schedule, whatever your skill level. That means that if you spend just a few minutes a day, you can gain new knowledge over time in an actually fun way. As time goes on, you'll get used to that feeling of learning too, because it isn't just about sitting down and reading. Brilliant teaches you by doing, using active learning to teach you the principles of otherwise quite complex topics, and ensuring that you understand what's actually going on. So whether you want to brush up on your basic math skills, improve your employment prospects by learning about future technology, or just have fun coding, then you can check out everything that Brilliant has to offer for free for 30 days by clicking the link below. Plus, the first 200 people to sign up will get 20% off Brilliant's premium annual subscription. Thank you so much for your support.